question a lot. I'm having a lot of fun. This is my 5th of 6 universities on this trip over 5 weeks. So I've been really fortunate to have that opportunity to come out to India and just be able to visit all these amazing schools. There's no shortage of amazing students here that are really passionate and excited to share stuff, and for some reason want me to be here. So I get the lucky thing of being invited to all these places.
And so, what do you think about the Think Again initiative that we've had so far?
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I think about all the revolutions that have ever happened in science, especially over 500 years, it's always because there's something in front of us that we're not thinking about. We take things for granted and we have assumptions, and we don't even know that they're assumptions. We just treat them. They are the window through which we see anything else. And sometimes we don't notice the window. So to me, sometimes education, sometimes you come to a school like this and there's a lot of professors that say, here's what we've learned in the last 500 years. Take it. A lot of professors in engineering and science, all these things say, here's what we've learned, so you need to know all this stuff so you can learn the next thing. And sometimes they forget why we learned all that in the first place, and the kind of internal curiosity and the process that brings us to new information. And the more that drives the system, the easier everything becomes, and it seems to almost be backwards from what we learn sometimes, that you have to question all of your preconceptions instead of just taking what people have told you and keep going with it.
So what is your perspective about the research initiative that will be undertaken in this? Like I think you must have gone around and seen some things. So as in the projects are being presented in the technical session also. So what do you think is the level? As in this is a good institute in India, but comparing internationally, what do you think is the level? Do we lag somewhere, or or are we at par with the other people? It's just that probably we don't have enough resources. So what is your views on that?
Well, I don't know about what resources you guys feel like you need. I never really feel like resources are the main issue ever. I haven't seen a lot of the different technical things going on in this festival. The one that comes to mind, I saw the Formula in the Car group and the other car, I forget what they call the other ones.
APOGEE and Baja.
And the Baja, yes. So I saw those, and there's nothing missing to me about any of that. But I've also talked to some of the students here, and I get this feeling implicitly, and also we talked about it explicitly, that what the students feel like they want is to learn what they're learning and also to have a chance to innovate and work on independent research with some kind of advisors. And I mean, my instinct is that probably a lot of the students here want that, and probably a lot of the faculty want that, but the system doesn't have it yet. And if there's just one conversation where a bunch of students get together and say we all want to start to work on innovation and our own research, I think it seems like you have plenty of the resources to do it, and there just has to be a conversation. So, I don't know, I think the school is amazing. I think that that's mostly because of the, it's like you can go to a school with no resources, but if the people there want to share something with each other, the school is great. And it doesn't matter if you have the right $1 million machine, it just matters where your attention is getting focused and how you kind of feed off of each other. So that to me is way more important than anything else on the outside in facilities, if the walls are painted a certain color. And I feel that energy at MIT where I was, and I feel that energy here. So I don't really think of them as very different. But the big difference about MIT and their program is that they have a real concentration in active research for all the students, undergraduates and graduates, trying to be participants in active research. And it seems like you guys are interested in that, and it seems really possible.
So the problem then is like in the policy that the system has, rather than a lack of like innovative, like people want to innovate, people do want to innovate, but it's just the policy that probably the Indian education system, I can say, has.
I wouldn't even call it a problem. I would just call it where things are right now. You know, there's always, you can always look at where things are right now and say there's all these problems, or you can say this is just where we are. And the thing that changes it is just people communicating. So it's not, it doesn't have to even be seen or brought up as a problem, it can just be brought up as, hey, we're all interested in this guy. How about you guys on the faculty? Are any of you interested in that? You know, the thing that comes to mind is, I bet out of, there's like 4,000 students here, right? I bet at least 1,000 of them are interested in something like this, doing some kind of innovation research or whatever. And I bet there's at least 5 people on faculty that are also interested in advising that kind of thing. That's plenty to get us started. It doesn't need even a tenth of that, you know? So I don't see it as a problem, I just see it, as soon as people feel that there's something that is missing, it's usually something that a lot of other people are feeling but haven't yet been open about communicating, and then it becomes really obvious once people communicate about it that people want to be in the next place. You know, I think it would be, to put it in extreme terms, I think it would be something that could get started a year from now if someone started having talks like all of us are having over the last couple of days. You know? But I think to view it as a problem kind of makes it harder to make the changes, and to just see it as an opportunity makes it easy.
So also, you've talked about interest of students and how they're into innovation. As far as you are concerned, you've had a specific choice of streams, a varied choice of streams, rather. So how did that come about?
I think when anyone looks backwards at their life, there seems to be a story that makes a lot of sense. But when you look forward, there's no story, and you have no idea what you're doing. You're just making choices as they come up. And for me, it's always been the same thing. It's always been whatever I've been doing in the past brings me to where I am, and then I feel some intuition that I want to do something then. You know, so I was going and doing physics and math for 4 years, and in my last term as an undergraduate, I took a mechanical engineering class just to learn how to make some things. And right when I did that, I said, oh, I don't want to do physics and math anymore, I want to build stuff. And so then I went into mechanical engineering, and I learned that for a while. And while I was doing that, I started doing robotics work. And then I started saying, oh, I can do art and science at the same time. I want to do that, so I'll leave mechanical engineering. But all these things become part of the next thing. So it always seems to be clear from the local perspective of what you should be doing. You know, this thing usually knows right away what it should be doing, but this thing gets confused. And this thing usually says what your parents tell you, and what your community tells you, and what culture on TV tells you. And it's kind of like the clouds. It makes it really hard to see what you actually just naturally want to do. And I guess I've been really lucky to just, whether by force or by choice, just end up following what I want to do most of the time.
So, more specifically, you talked about your brain and how it lies to yourself. You spoke about the same thing in your lecture. So, I mean, in this specific, Mr. Dev Patnaik, he spoke about different perspectives and how each perspective can be different and equally correct. So, do you think that the fact that the brain lying to ourselves, saying that we are no longer part of everything that exists and that we are different, is that the real truth, or is it just a perspective?
Well, anything that we put into words is already false, because, you know, like, the word water can never make me quench my thirst. I have to actually have a real experience with a real thing. And I can call this water, or I can call it a dog. It doesn't matter what the word is, it matters what the experience is. I agree with what he said, that when you have any specific perspective on things, that they all have their own level of truth. But I think the only kind of real way to answer the question about how true our one perspective is to say that they're all false. Not to say that they're all true, but to say that they're all reasonable, but not true. And when I talk about things like the brain lying to you, it's not that that's a perspective that someone should take. It's that every time you notice within yourself your brain lying to you, you have to be noticing it from a perspective that's free of that lie. And so you don't have to take any perspective or believe in any concept. You are letting go of beliefs, and you are letting go of preconceptions. And so it's not that you you get to a real perspective because you get a new concept that is real. It's because you get rid of all concepts that are false. And in some sense, all concepts are false, including any words we use to talk about it.
Sir, how did you start thinking in this way? As in, like, if a normal person, any random student thinks in this way, like, there is no real guidance for that. No, like, if I start thinking in this way, if I want to actually, go into the field, go into the depth of it, like, actually, talk about perspective and study about that, but I don't know where to start from. So, sir, where exactly, did you get the inspiration to, think in these terms, to actually analyze situations and come to certain conclusions, which are, like, to some extent, they are some kind of conclusions. So, sir, how did that happen?
You can call it inspiration, or you can call it depression. And, while I was doing all these things that people think are the great things and having a TV show and stuff like that, I was depressed. And all of the external things were fine. I had a girlfriend, and I had money, and I had the right job, and all this stuff, and it didn't feel good. And when you hit that kind of crisis, you have to start looking at yourself. You have no option. Because, for a while you can think that you get a better and better job and finally it's going to be fine, but when you get a job like a TV show, it becomes very clear that that's never going to be fine, right? There's not some other better, so it's not the job, and it's not the girlfriend, and it's not the money, and it's not the house, or any of that stuff. But if you don't get that stuff, you can live your whole life thinking that it is those things, and feeling like, okay, I just need to get 2 more things, I gotta run a little faster, and I gotta work a little harder. So in some sense, I was really lucky that none of that stuff worked, and it became very clear when I was about 30 that none of that stuff was going to work. And so that's when I was looking into Western psychology has certain ways to look at that situation, and Eastern psychology has different ways of looking at it. And I started reading about meditation, and I started looking into people, and once I found basically this guy Nisargadatta, who his name is Nisargadatta. He's a guy from Mumbai, and I come from a scientific background, so I was trying to understand this thing with a scientific theory, but it slowly led me more and more to reading about meditation and really understanding how this thing puts theories together. And I probably read 200 books in a year or two, just trying to understand what was going on, and I finally found a book that is him talking to strangers, just like we're talking, called I Am That. And he laid out a lot of what I'm talking about very, very clearly. And not only that, but he's very clear about the conceptual things are pretty easy to understand about how this thing layers on top of reality and creates an illusory reality on top. But he's also very clear about how to get rid of those illusions with certain awareness, certain kind of focus. And some people call that witnessing meditation or awareness meditation, or it doesn't matter what you call it. But once you read his words and you have enough faith to believe that what he's saying might be real, or believe anybody in it, it justifies trying what he says. And there's no substitute in any of this for hearing what someone says and saying, oh, okay, I get it, because it doesn't change your life. It just changes some facts that you have in your head. But he lays out what to actually do and how to actually see from moment to moment what's going on and to let go of all these false beliefs. And once that started happening, the depression started automatically disappearing. Not because I was trying to get away from depression, but because I was trying to understand where it came from. And you have almost like an objective scientific view about my own mind, the way that we tend to have a scientific view about nature on the outside. And it really is a scientific kind of method, but it can only be confirmed by yourself.
So I think just wind up with one last question. You talked about your show. This will be with regards to your show. So what do you think about your fan base?
My fan base?
As in, sir, like, if you came to India now and you probably, have you visited any other country? So like at all those places, the fan base, the reaction that you got for the show, and like people, like you told us yesterday in the lecture that the water drop thing they weren't letting you do, but when you actually did it, it was so brilliant that they wanted another shot. So, sir, what was your perspective about your own show, as in like which were the best experiments that you conducted, and what do you think is the fan base? You know, what the people want to see more in the show, and you know, the whole thing.
Well, first of all, the Indian fans are the best fans. I have never really gone to a lot of other countries to speak, but for whatever reason, I've been invited by a lot of universities in India. And I think probably it's because, first of all, they made it a point to show the show in India, and it's not showing in every single country. They choose which ones to show it in. But I think also there's a lot of people in India that really love TV and really love science and really love that kind of show, you know. And so it kind of fits maybe what a lot of people are interested in. And you know, for me, it was always this balance between making a science educational show and also just making a really fun show. And that's a really hard balance. And I think most of the problems that I ever had with the show were in my own head trying to push on that balance and trying to make it more educational and more scientific. And when you make a show that's seen by more than 2 million people, you can't make it all about science. It has to be, you know, maybe that can enter the picture, but if you start telling people that you're making a science show, they just won't even turn it on. So it taught me a lot about making a show. I guess it taught me that if you're teaching someone something and they know they're learning something, then you're doing it wrong. But if you're teaching someone something and they just think they're having fun, then you're doing it right. And so that, I got a lot out of learning that on the show. And hopefully that's why people like the show, you know, in India and everywhere else.
That's what.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Thanks, a good talk to you. Now, we at that place at 5:30.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. All right, well, who's next? About 15. Okay. Isha. Rana. Nice to meet you.
Yash.
Yash, good to meet you. Are you from the HPC?
Okay.
Cool. As long as you ask the questions in English.
That's the
Sure.
Particularly, he's a very good friend of mine.
I couldn't hear you.
He's a very good friend of mine.
Okay.
If he doesn't usually write, he is a very good poetry master. If you were to maybe, I don't know, he basically writes in Hindi, but if you were to read his poems and maybe just understand the grasp of it or something, love it. He's very talented, very nice man.
Cool. Well, hopefully I can read some kind of translation.
Yeah, I can read something left. So we won't be boring you with technical stuff because you already had a lecture and you'll be giving the evening talk about that. So,
I'm not giving a talk. I'm just talking
Yeah,
about what
question
you
and
want to
answer.
talk about. But you can ask me anything that crosses your mind.
we all know life after you joined MIT from so many degrees, but how was your life before MIT? How was your initial stages of life? Did any experience help you achieve what you achieved today?
I think a lot of things. Okay, so let me start back in the beginning, and not make it a 2-hour-long answer. But I was pretty good at math and pretty good at science from an early age. I could tell this, and my teachers could tell it, and my parents could tell by the time I was like 5. You know, and I think the amount that I was really good at math and science compared to the next person was maybe like 1% different, you know? But there's a funny thing that happens in school when you're 1% different than everyone else, and the teachers start telling you you're better at things than everyone else. You start to notice that when you do math well, they're all smiling at you, right? And you get this feedback cycle going. And so you start spending more time doing it because that's when everyone around you is really happy, and that starts to make you really happy. And so you start liking it more and more. And so this little difference in maybe potential or talent starts to become a gigantic difference in performance because you start spending thousands and thousands of hours just having fun working with numbers. And you know, even by the time I was 8 years old, I was just sitting at home, just writing math, you know, just like playing with, you know, how do you add all the numbers from 1 to 1,000 together? I don't know, I'm just playing, at an 8-year-old, I was just looking at patterns, and I think everyone likes that kind of thing until some teacher tells them they're not good at it. And unfortunately, I think that happens to most people in the
It
world.
plays
still.
a really big role.
Yeah, and all these little tiny differences in talent, if everyone were told at whatever level they understood that they are doing great and that they should just be enjoying it, everyone would grow up and enjoy it. And then they'd all be as best as they could be at math and science. But instead, around 9 years old usually, someone tells most kids, some teacher tells them they're not so great. And then they just believe it and they make it true for the rest of their lives. So, you know, I was really into art and I was really into math and science, and people kept smiling at me and telling me I was good at those things, and so I kept doing them more and more and enjoying them more and more, because you can enjoy anything, you know. Some people enjoy killing other people, you know. It doesn't really matter what it is, as long as people will tell you you're doing a good thing. And those fashions change all the time, you know. So if I had been born 10,000 years ago, no one cared about math. No one would have told me that at all. I wouldn't be good at math now. So that kind of defined a lot about my life. You know, I had this kind of tendency to like those things, and then it fed back.
You should push that you can.
Yeah, and then
Probably
then
that's
you
the thing you're pushing it today is getting the appreciation for what you're doing.
yeah, and it's all one thing, right? It's all a consequence of the same process. And the more that you engage in it, the more that other things push you up, you know. And you know, it started separating me from a lot of other people in my school, you know, because I was kind of focused on different things, and people were mostly focused on just like hanging out and social things, and I was doing math competitions and stuff like that. And so I would go to lunch and I would sit with my math teacher and talk about math instead of sitting with other kids and that sort of thing. And by the time I got to MIT, I was frustrated living in Miami, in a place where not a lot of people like math and science, and just really excited to go to a place where everyone wanted to talk about math and science. So that was a big thing for me, to finally be surrounded by that kind of environment.
And what are the current projects that you're working on?
Can we show you one?
Oh,
Okay.
amazing.
It's on a little phone, so if anyone wants to see it, I can pass it around, or you can just come over and see it. Let's see if it works, because it's on Dropbox. We are working on this name. Let's see. So I'll tell you the background of this while I get it going. It's a chandelier for a company called CSIS, the Center for Strategic International Studies. So they're a company that's been around for about 100 years and studies global data trends, like what happens in the world in any kind of way, whether it's like wealth or water quality or anything like that, over hundreds of years. And what we're doing is we're making a chandelier that sits in the space. The chandelier is almost the size of this room. It's about 25 feet by 15 feet. And it's 450 hanging separate elements that are these little plastic rods with embedded lights. And they're all playing out this kind of like form. And each one has an individual brightness control, so they're each kind of playing out animated patterns. And if you look at the side view, it looks like a form. It's like a wave of a form. But if you look underneath from up top, it's the map of the world. And all of the animations that we're playing on the lights are the data that the company has come up with over the last 100 years. Exactly. So it's a way to present the data without presenting the data. So people will come in and at first they'll have no idea that they're seeing data, but they're actually seeing the movement of real quantities over the last century.
Education with fun.
Yeah, I mean, I hope always that when someone sees any piece, they don't think about it first. They think about it later, but at first they just stop thinking and they just there. You know? So that's one project. I'm also, you know, sometimes I work on a lot smaller sculptures just for myself, and you know, I'm working on, I think it's 3 pieces right now that are just kind of small little desktop pieces and wall pieces, with the intention of doing some kind of manufacturing run of them, like on Kickstarter or some kind of crowdfunding site. And all of them are in the prototyping phase right now. Yeah. So hopefully in 2013 we'll be releasing probably 2 of those on Kickstarter and try to get pre-sales for them to manufacture them. And yeah, and then I guess the other thing I spend my time on a lot is music. So yeah, we just finished an album a couple months ago, and we're working on a new album with my band, which is one of the guys named Eric Gunther. The band is linked from my Facebook page, so you can listen to all the music for free. I'm not trying to sell anything. And then I spend the rest of my time meditating mostly.
That's a link I want to.
Okay, wherever you want.
You've gone from science to a kind of spiritual world, connected both of them, as I could relate to the last lecture. So how was the transition? I mean, it was purely science, and then something you've evolved kind of a spiritual knowledge of the existence of humankind and all that. So how was the transformation? Initially, you might be believing all this.
Oh yeah, initially I rejected all of these things very, very strongly. You know, all these kind of people like Richard Dawkins, who, you know, very anti-religion and all these sort of things. I was really into that for a while, and I for some reason felt like science was very contrary. So it's funny though, because when you look at what science is saying at its core, it's saying that everything is made of one thing, right? It's conceptual though. It says this is made of atoms, but that's a concept. No one has ever actually felt an atom. No one has actually felt a photon before. The most raw thing we have is the experience, and then we derive all these concepts about the experience, like atoms and energy, whatever that might be. So all those concepts, what I started to realize, I guess about 5 years ago, is that all of those concepts are not what's really happening. They're just a filtered way to understand that and derive patterns out of what's happening. But all this happened at the same time. I was talking about in the last interview, you know, all these things that seemed like they were going right in life didn't make me feel like I was doing the right thing. And so it was not that I was a scientist who said, I want to study spirituality. It was more like I was doing all these things and I said, what is wrong? Right?
Something missing.
Something missing. And I think almost everybody feels like something is missing on some level. Like there's some other place to get. Like there's some goal, and it's always in the future. And a lot of people live their whole lives believing that and thinking that if they just do one more thing, it's great. But when you actually analyze the situation and you look at a person who's truly happy, are they ever happy because they are trying to find happiness? No, they're happy because they are lacking the desire to find anything. And that's very backwards. And you know, as soon as I started reading people like Nisargadatta's work, and seeing that the cause of my own stress and anxiety and depression was coming from myself and not from anything else, that flipped the whole thing. And so the science that I had been studying for the previous 30 years, which was always about all this, started to be a science about this. This is hard to write down. It's all inside, and your entire model of reality is based on the way you think. And so, you know, people like Nisargadatta are way more clear than I am about this kind of thing. My mind is still tangled up in a lot of this mess.
So do you believe on the personal inquisitiveness about it? Do you believe in parallel world, parallel universe concept?
You mean like a quantum mechanical kind of parallel universe?
Yeah, something synonymous with my identity somewhere around the world, in a different world, doing the same kind of thing that we are doing, that there is another parallel world going on. Do you believe in that concept? Somehow,
I don't know. I don't, honestly, it's funny, I don't think much more these days about the scientific theories about the way things are. Because on some level, all of them are a description of something. And whatever is really going on, whatever reality really is, it's actually reality right here and right now. It's not something that has to be theorized about. It's actually underneath any theory. And the problem, not a problem, the thing that tends to be happening, at least now in science, is that we've built all these theories that let us build cell phones and transistors and medicine, and we think that that means that they are real, instead of conceptual utility that helps us make phones. So we start to think all these concepts about Maxwell's equations are actually the way the world works, instead of a description of the patterns that we see. And that's really, it's very different to have that attitude. And when you have that attitude that your theories about the world are right, then you also think that what you think is fundamentally what's going on. And this kind of practice, if you want to call it that, of looking inward, is much less about trying to come up with a theory about the way things work, and it's much more about realizing that all theories are false, and that everything that you ever will believe is on some fundamental level false. And that underneath all that is something that's real, but it might be nothing like what you expect it to be. And so that's really tricky, because what does every scientist go into? This is just one example. The assumption that every scientist has when they're trying to figure out theories about the world is that they are a person that is trying to find out a theory about the world, that they're separate from it. Yeah, and so once you have that, maybe it's impossible to find the answer because you're basing it on an assumption that's totally false.
So do you, on this note, do you relate your perception to the lecture that was following Mr. Lieberman? Did you hear this lecture?
Yeah.
So could you relate your beliefs to his concepts?
Yeah, I don't think a lot about management, personally. I mean, he's the management expert. But I think he was getting at very similar things about, any kind of personal attitude is usually taken as the normal attitude, and then everyone else seems crazy, instead of realizing that you're also crazy. And once someone realizes that their own attitudes are just as arbitrary as everyone else's, it definitely becomes a lot easier to interact with people and find common ground instead of pushing against each other.
How do you get the idea of this Playback Design you're designing from?
The what design?
The Playback Design
Plebeian design. Plebeian design first came out because of the Absolute Quartet project, because we got a commission and we were going to get a check with a lot of money to make the thing. You don't want to put that in your name, or else your taxes go all weird. So that was when we first formed the company for that. Once that project ended, I just keep using it for my own work, whatever that might be, whether it's public speaking or whether it's making pieces or anything like that. So originally the name came from, it was my friend Dan Paluska, so P for Paluska and L for Lieberman. We were just brainstorming names, and plebeian is a really great word, which I don't know if you know that here, but plebeian kind of is from Roman times, means just the kind of average person, nothing special. And to me, there's something really attractive about that, because a lot of the time, artists and designers and everything is trying to kind of declare their unique specialness. And I like thinking about just the average person on the street. Yeah, and maybe what can we do for that person instead of the 1% or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, this year, how many times have you visited India before?
Just one time before this, but it was for about a month, and this one is for 5 weeks. So I'm racking up my time. I'm up to 2 months.
So how was your experience different? You came around 6 years back?
2 years back. I came for IIT Guwahati that time, and then I stayed and explored some north of India, like Delhi and Rishikesh and Shimla and all that sort of thing. And it's been great. I mean, this trip has been all over the place. I can list everything. If you want to know where I've been, it doesn't seem really important for me to list 20 locations. Yeah, there's just so much variety in India, packed into a pretty small place, and also so many people packed into a pretty small place. I think the area of India is like a half to a third of the area of the U.S., but with almost 4 times as many people. So that's 10 times the density. It's incredible. To see the kind of tropical climates in Goa and Kochi, and then come up to Rajasthan and see camels walking through the street, and then go to Mumbai, and it's like nothing else on the planet. It's incredible. Yeah, it's just really cool to see the variety.
Yeah, I have a question. It's really fantastic that everything we see in continuity actually has discrete elements in it. So, for example, you showed that video, and with the liquid crystals plates were there. It's something which is in our everyday life, but not a normal average person does not notice. How did you come to notice this discreteness in the continuity of life? How did you?
It's hard to. I guess it's always hard to kind of put the cause as like a single thing, right? Because everything causes everything else. But I would say, when you go through physics, you learn about quanta, and you learn about how things are made up of discrete parts. And I don't even necessarily believe that things are made of discrete parts, but things just seem to be made out of discrete parts. And when you look at a computer monitor and you focus on one pixel and there's something flying around, you notice that one pixel is just changing color, and that a TV is just a total illusion in your head too. So I was always noticing those kinds of things and started building pieces based on the limits that we see. And then when the show happened, it was in a different way, and when optical illusions came up, it was in a different way. Everything started to kind of reinforce the same message that we are kind of creating all these things. We are believing in them, and we make them real by believing in them.
Just to wrap up, great if you sing songs with album. I mean, the entire.
Why don't I play you a song so you can hear the whole thing?
But to get a live performance from you would be amazing.
But I'm not the lead singer on the album.
That doesn't matter.
I'm the backup singer.
That doesn't matter.
I'll sing the backup if you sing the lead.
You play the lead in there.
I'll play. Why don't I play a song and we'll see where it goes. And if you feel something's missing.
Along.
Do you guys have a specific kind of music that you like? Because the album has a lot of slow songs, some funk, some R&B, some gospel-y kind of songs, like church.
What is it?
So any song that is close to your heart?
Oh,
Closest.
all of them. I mean,
Okay.
that's why we made the album. Well, actually, I'll play you a song that's not on the album that I've been listening to a lot lately. But I can't sing it. It's only 2 minutes long. But it was but I think it's a little more interesting because you can listen to all the songs on the album. But I've been playing with Eric for 10 years now, and everything we do is based on improvisation. So we never sit down and write anything. It's always that we turn on the recorders on the piano and on the vocal mic and on the percussion, and we sit wherever we feel like sitting, and we just close our eyes and we sit in silence. And then at some point, someone starts playing something, and then we just go. And sometimes that goes for an hour before we just stop. And then we listen back and we say, oh, that part worked, and we cut them up and we shorten it, and then that's the songs. And that's how every song on our album was made. Sometimes go back and fix something up. But now that we've been doing that for 10 years, sometimes in 2 minutes, a song will come out finished. We'll have the whole song from beginning to end. It won't have sections. It will never come back to the same place. It will just always be kind of finding its own thing. And so this one is, there's no speakers in here, are there? Okay. This is just going to be a little cell phone playing this now that I've built up a whole description. But this is just me on piano and Eric singing, fully improvised for 2 minutes. So, anyway, it's going to be really quiet, so feel free to come in. Huddle around the phone if you want to hear it. Eric.
Yeah.
What was the chord progression on that one?
It's all over the place. It's in B major. That's all I can tell you.
Do you know he's a good musician?
I play a little bit of guitar.
Yeah.
You
Sing
have
along.
time, you could definitely.
Yeah,
Do you
I'm
play
like,
guitar?
I play mostly piano, but I can play guitar a little bit. If there's time to sit down with some music people, you can fiddle around. I can definitely play through that on piano now that I've listened to it a bunch, but what's funny when you're improvising is you're just following wherever the music's going. You're kind of just like, okay, you're not even really thinking about it at all. It's just happening, and then
In the zone.
in the zone, totally in the zone. And then I have to go back and listen to these, and I have to learn them. And it takes me sometimes weeks to learn what I played in 2 minutes because it's much easier to do it in flow, and it's much harder to rehearse the flow. So yeah, this whole album that we're doing now is all these songs like this, and now we made them in like a total of 15 minutes, but now we have to learn them so we can actually play them live. So we're getting better at just finishing them right in 2 minutes and then never needing to play them again, but otherwise it takes weeks to rehearse.
It's great stuff.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Absolutely.